welcome to another Tableau tutorial. Today we're going to talk about some basic statistical graphs that are actually somewhat surprisingly hard to do in Tableau. First off, we're going to start with histograms, then boxplots, and then a scatter plot with trend. Let's start out with histograms first. To begin with, the X and the Y axis are actually a little bit challenging. In particular, for my X axis down here, this actually requires taking whatever variable you want on your X axis and actually creating a binned version of that variable. And on my Y axis, we need to take that same variable, but then transform it to counts. Let's see how to do this. So first off, we're going to make a binned version of my weight category here. So notice we're in my measures bit, and we're going to go down to this create. And one of the ways that we can create is calculated field, but also a binned version of weight. So I'm going to go check this. And at this point, it's going to give me a binned version of it. And because I've already done this, there's a version 2. Now you can select the size of the bins that you want. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to select that this is going to be 10 pounds is going to be the length of each of these bins. I'm going to click OK. And now up here in my categories, my dimensions, I've got this weight binned, which is really now it's a category. So I'm just going to go and drop this on my X axis. So I could drop it on my X axis up here, or I could drop it right here, either way. So now I've got these nice bins. So I'm going to take the same variable and drop it on my Y axis. Now by default, it takes my weight value and it does some aggregation. In this case, by default, it does the sum. But what I actually want is I want the number of observations, the number of rows in my data per bin here. And we're going to go down to this measure and change it from summing all of the observations in each of the bins to counting the number of elements in each bin. And that will change this. Now the last thing is that this is treating each of these as a category and not recognizing that in fact my x-axis is continuous. To make that final transformation, we're going to go up to this binned version and get into the attributes. And down here, there is an option for discrete versus continuous. Discrete means that the bars are going to be separated as if they're categories. Continuous is going to squish the bars together and make a histogram. And this gives us the histogram that we wanted to make. Next up, boxplots. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at the weights of these students by year in school. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to essentially take a scatter plot where all of my observations are individual points and then modify it. So to begin with, let's do this. We're going to take year and put it on my x-axis. I'm going to take weight and I'm going to put it on my y-axis. Again, I'm going to get rid of this sum, this aggregation step, and turn it into dimension. And what that'll do is it'll just show what we've got for weight for each individual. And now I've just got a whole ton of dots. And this is what we want. Now, to turn on my box plots, we have to go over to this Analytics tab. And we'll click on the Analytics, and there's some options here. And what we want is we want to click on this box plot. So all we have to do is double click on this. And the box plots show up. Now, unfortunately, the box plots are pretty ugly because all of the raw data is in fact obscuring it. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to modify the raw data so that these data points are actually hidden. So we'll go over to the marks category, and the marks are referring to the circles that mark the individual observations. And one thing that we could do is we could change the size of these dots. And that makes the individual observations a little bit less overwhelming. But they're still there, and I sort of find that ugly. The other thing that we could do is I'm going to go to color, and I'm going to modify the opacity. Opacity is how solid the observation is, or the mark. And if I turn opacity all the way down to 0, that makes it completely transparent. So the dots are still there, they're just completely invisible, and this gives the box plot that you are typically used to seeing. The final thing that I want to be able to do is I want to be able to take a scatter plot and add a trend line. So here we're going to make a scatter plot of weight versus height, and we're going to separate this out by males and females. So this is exactly what you would expect. You take our weights and you take our heights and plop them on the x-axis. So we'll go here and we'll take our weight, and that's going to be my y-axis, and we're going to take our height, and that's going to be our x-axis. And as usual, it's aggregated them, and we want to get rid of the aggregation by clicking on the dimension so that it shows the actual observation for both of these. And now we've got a scatter plot. Now I wanted to add gender to this as well. So we're going to go ahead and do gender by color. Keep in mind that we could have done gender as a facet by either making 2 columns, one for males and one for females, or 2 rows. All right, so these are our heights and weights for our males and our females. So in order to add the trend line, all we need to do is again go over to the analytics, and now we're going to go down to this trend line instead. Double click on this and it'll add our trend lines. Now, if you've done this and you want to get rid of it, if you do a right click, you can, actually if you double click on it, yes, if you double click on it, it brings up this option and it shows you both the function that defines this relationship as well as the remove option. So I could go ahead and get rid of that remove, and that would get rid of those. But our whole point was that we wanted them. So that is how to make a histogram, box plots, and a scatter plot with trend line within Tableau. Have a good day.